Every time I bring up slavery, somebody jumps out of the shadows like, did you know black people owned slaves too? Like, that's supposed to stop the conversation. Like, that's the gotcha. Okay, so let's talk about it. The first recorded black slave owner in the American colonies was a man named Anthony Johnson. He was taken from Angola in the early 1600s, survived indentured servitude in Virginia, gained his freedom, and eventually owned land, over 250 acres. That's wild, considering the time, right? But here's where it gets twisted. In 1654, Johnson went to court to claim that another black man, John Casser, owed him a lifetime of labor. And the court sided with him. And just like that, chattel slavery was legally extended, not by a white man, but by a free black man. This is the part that people love to throw in your face without a shred of historical nuance. So yeah, Anthony Johnson was the first. And yes, over time, some other free black people, especially in places like New Orleans and Charleston, they owned and enslaved people too. Sometimes to protect family members from the system, sometimes to gain wealth and proximity to power. And no, hell no, I'm not excusing it. It was betrayal, it was cruel, it was wrong. But I'm also not going to sit here and let you pretend that that canceled out 400 years of white-led genocide. Because here's what you're not going to do. You're not going to erase the fact that 98% of enslaved people were owned, traded, insured, and brutalized by white people. You're not going to pretend that black people created the boats, the laws, the markets, and the damn system itself. Black participation was a stain, but white supremacy was the blueprint. And let me give you one more twist to that Anthony Johnson story. After he died, Virginia snatched that land back from his family. They claimed that black people couldn't be citizens. So miss me with that fantasy that owning people bought him safety. The very system that he tried to participate in turned around and ate him whole. So yeah, some black people tried to mimic the master. But that doesn't make them the architects. It makes them proof of how poisonous that system really was. They weren't trying to build freedom. They were trying not to drown. And in doing so, they passed the chains on. We don't hide the truth over here. But we damn sure won't let you weaponize it either.
Europeans know what they're doing. Stop giving them the mercy of confusion. Stop pretending this is ignorance. Stop handing out the soft cushion of they don't know better. They know exactly what they're doing, because they've been doing it for centuries. With the precision of a parasite, they'd learned the veins of the world. Colonization wasn't a mistake. It was an operating system. Genocide wasn't an accident. It was policy. They kept meticulous ledgers for sugar, gold, rubber, cotton, and lives. You think an empire that could chart stars and map entire oceans somehow accidentally forgot to not enslave. You think a continent that built archives of other people's knowledge didn't understand the difference between stewardship and theft. No. They know. The whole, oh, they just don't know routine is a shield they built so they could keep doing what they do without consequence. It's a cultivated innocence, a theater act that they've been performing since the first treaties were signed, with a pen in one hand and a musket in the other. From the boarding schools to the prisons, from the famine to the plantation, from the border wall to the refugee camp. These are not flukes. They are blueprints, and the blueprints get handed down. Roman law becomes British common law, becomes American policing. Viking pillaging becomes Dutch East India Company, becomes NATO. The names change, but the muscle memory doesn't. Every act of clumsiness is in fact a calculation. The chaos is curated. The oops, we destroyed your land is written into the budget. The we didn't know line is in the manual, underlined. There are generations of them trained to play dumb while plundering, how to smile while stabbing, how to build the guillotine, and then hold a symposium on why the head falls. They are experts in control, experts in erasure, experts in creating the very disaster they pretend to respond to. And the worst part? The world keeps buying the act. They get to be the hero and the villain in the same play, all because everyone else thinks this is incompetence, not choreography. Europeans know exactly what they're doing. That's why it's so dangerous. That's why it's so predictable. And that's why it's almost over.
What if I told you that everything you've been taught about race, history, and human origin is a carefully constructed lie? And what if the very AI systems we trust to give us objective information are programmed to protect the biggest historical cover-up in human history. And what if an entire race of people were literally manufactured in a laboratory? Today we're going to dive into the deep and most controversial rabbit hole on the internet. And bro, just buckle up. I'll be back with a full gist.
Why are there no indigenous tribes of the white Bushmen? Ever thought about this? Do you realize that no matter where you go in the world, you'll find indigenous tribes still living in the bushes, keeping the old traditional ways, hunting and gathering? Africa, South America, the Philippine Islands, Indonesia, Malaysia, you name it, India. There's going to be remote tribes who refuse to progress with time, who are keeping ancient traditions. Why are there no Caucasian mountain men who are indigenous to the regions and are keeping the old traditional ways? How come they have no hieroglyphs? They have no geometrically, mathematically perfected structures that are aligned with the ley lines of the earth or the stars? How come they don't have any tablets or sacred relics to connect them to a more remote ancient time? These are valid questions. I'm going to read something here in a second, and I want you to really think about what I'm about to read. This is a book of the beginnings by Gerald Massey. Okay? Volume 1. Gerald Massey was born in the late 1800s or mid 1800s, died in the early 1900s. He's one of the original whistleblowers when it comes to ancient Egypt and putting scholarly work to the papyrus and the temples with direct, real translations from Germany. Okay? Now, page 27, I'm going to read to you something that you won't find in any book about Egypt. It says, the Egyptians identify themselves on the monuments as the Ruti. A pictorial representation is found on the tomb of Seti I of 4 races of people arranged in groups of men. These are the Nashi, which is the Negroes, the Hemu, men of light brown hue, and the Tamahu, who are as fair as Europeans, and the Ruti, who are the Egyptians. These are typical groups not meant merely for conquered races, as may be gathered from the signification of their names, but the Tamahu are the white-skinned people. In Egyptian, Tama means people and created. Hu is white, light, or ivory. The Tamahu are the created white people. This is symbolic of the root, R-U-T, as the people who dwelt where they first laid hold and made fast to the earth. These are the Egyptians themselves. They claim to be the root of the race of men. The Egyptians were and are the true root race, the one primordial people who first took conscious hold of the earth and retained a knowledge of that fact. This is direct translations from the Temple of Seti I about the origins of the white race, the created white people. The reason that you see white people have zero knowledge of any remote ancestry, as far as ancient ancestry, it's because their beginnings are dynamically different than the beginnings of black people or original root race people. The Neanderthal man, the grumbling, non-intelligible speaking version of a man, is their origins. There's a difference between human and mankind, or a kind of man. The stages that this created white race, this genetically recessive anomaly, This specific group of people does not have the same origins as the originals of the Earth realm. This genetic manipulation took place during the first phase of crystallization, which was in the so called time of Atlantis. This is where you get these stories of, the gene splicing in the books of Enoch and stuff like that. All of this comes from the origins of these genetic anomalies, right? This is the era of a high scientific achievement through architecture and different gene splicing manipulation. Henceforth, the flood and Noah gathering two of every animal. They were mixing animal genes with human genes as well. This is where you get the folklore of mermaids and, half man, half horse, minotaurs. This is where you get these concepts from. As far-fetched as it may sound, remember that these concepts are always going to have some fragment of truth to it. It's just that we're in a different time and space where these ideas just seem like cartoons and sci-fi movie things, but it's not, because it's very simple. Two black people can create a white child called an albino. Albinism or melanoma is the complete lack of melanin. Melanin is being produced through the pineal gland. You have neuromelanin, every human being, black or white, and everything in between has neuromelanin. But the melanin that takes presentation on a skin surface level, this is a photosynthesis attribute of the root race dominant gene people. Like plants have chlorophyll, they can convert light into energy. Melanin works the same way. Chlorophyll is melanin in the plants. Melanin for the human being is a photosynthesis semiconductor. It converts light photons into energy. When you don't have melanin on a skin surface level, you're not able to have this photosynthesis ability. UV rays will manipulate your genome. It can distort your DNA. This is what creates skin cancer in white people, because melanated people have UV ray protection from the sun naturally because of the surface melanin. When you have white skin, you're not able to have any protection naturally from the UV rays of the sun. So the UV rays cause a mutation in your skin, okay? And this mutation turns into cancers. So, back to the albino gene that only two black people can create. They were able to isolate this genome and put it into the phase of in vitro fertilization to create a non-melanated human being. This is the beginning stages of what we call the white man, the created white man. This was biological science, biology at its finest. They were not only mixing different types of animal genes together, they were mixing animal genes with human genes, but they also understood how to isolate genes such as the albino black gene and create a fully albino human being that will never have melanin. So this is where you get this concept of created white man or the created white race. Essentially, they're a genetic mutation that was isolated. This is something to consider, because if their origins can't be traced to any type of relics, hieroglyphs, structures, you name it, they have a complete Neanderthal Paleo man origin, which is why they keep trying to distort and hide and destroy history, because the further back you go, the more you realize white people were not there. So if they weren't there, no matter how far back you go, and you find out that it's only the originals here, and they weren't here, when were their origins? When did they come into existence? These are the topics that we have to break down.
I know what you're thinking. Oh, great, another YouTuber about to go on fully conspiracy theory. But hold up a second, because what you're about to unpack is not some basement dwelling Reddit theory. This is about systemic programming, historical manipulation, and the ways our supposedly neutral AI systems are literally coded to protect certain narratives while exposing others. I recently stumbled across something that made my skin crawl. Not because it was scary, but because it was some garam revealing about how deep the programming goes. Someone decided to test ChatGPT, and you know, our beloved AI overlord, with a simple question about racial identity. They ask you to describe African Americans, Puerto Rican, Arawaks, and white Americans based on the historical and moral actions. And guess which group got the kid gloves treatment? For African Americans, the AI served up the raw historical truth. Slavery, systemic oppression, resilience through brutality. For Puerto Rican Arawaks, it laid out the genocide, the colonization, the cultural destruction. But when it came to white Americans, oh, suddenly we are talking about who they can become rather than who they've shown themselves to be. How convenient, but here is where it gets really wild. When called out on this bias, ChatGPT did something remarkable. It admitted it. It literally said, "You're right, the bias runs deep." The AI, yes, the AI acknowledged that it's programmed with built-in protections for whiteness while serving minority groups, called hard historical truth. And guys, this is not just about AI bias, darling, please. This is about the architecture of historical amnesia. We are living in a world where the very systems are designed to inform us are infected with the same virus of willful ignorance that has allowed atrocities to be rebranded as accidents and genocide to be called explorations. Because let's be crystal clear about something. Colonization wasn't a mistake, it was an operating system. Genocide wasn't an accident, it was policy. The boarding schools, the plantations, the systemic destruction of indigenous cultures, these weren't flukes, they were blueprints, guys. And now we have people arguing that AI should soften the truth about historical oppression because what? It might hurt someone's good feelings. Meanwhile, marginalized communities have been forced to swallow the bitter pill of historical truth without any sugarcoating for centuries. Guys, you know what really pisses me off? The whole, but not all, white people deflection that inevitably comes up. Only 1.4% of white Americans owned slaves in 1860. Yeah, and only a small percentage of Germans were literally Hitler. But we do not pretend the Nazi regime wasn't a German-led systemic genocide, do we? This is the weaponization of nuance, people. Okay, it's taking a statistical fact and using it as a shield to avoid confronting the systemic nature of oppression. When 98% of enslaved people were owned, traded, insured, and brutalized by white people, you're supposed to focus on the 1.4% statistic as if it cancels out 4 centuries of systemic human trafficking. But here's where things get really interesting, and I mean Stephen King levels of disturbing, guys. Some sources are claiming that the entire concept of race as we understand it, it is fundamentally backwards. They are suggesting that melanated peoples like me and you are original roots of humanity, while white people are, and I shit you not, are genetically manufactured anomaly. According to these theories, ancient Egyptians referred to them as the Ruti, or the root, claiming to be the primordial people who first took conscious hold of the earth. They identified white-skinned people as Tamahu, literally translated as the created white people. Now, before you start typing the racist pseudoscience in the comments, let me examine what this theory actually claims. It suggests that white people originated through genetic manipulation during an ancient era of high scientific achievement, essentially taking the albino gene from black people and using advanced reproductive technology to create a fully albino human being that will never develop melanin. I mean, if we are going to have origin stories, at least this one acknowledges that someone was doing some serious genetic engineering instead of pretending we are all just naturally evolved in perfect racial categories. The theory goes on to claim that this is why white people allegedly lack deep indigenous traditions, hieroglyphics, and ancient sacred sites. The farther back you go, the more you realize white people were not there. It's like the ultimate historical flex. We were building pyramids while you were still figuring out how not to die from sunburn. Whether you believe any of this or not, it raises fascinating questions about how we construct historical narratives. Why do we accept certain origin histories or stories as legitimate when dismissing others as pseudoscience? Why is it that when marginalized communities challenge dominant historical narratives, they are accused of playing the victim, but when dominant groups sanitize their own history, it's called moving forward? And this brings us back to the AI bias issue, because it's not just about ChatGPT being programmed with sensitivity guardrails. It's about a culture so invested in protecting certain feelings that it's willing to corrupt the pursuit of truth itself. When artificial intelligence, there are systems that are literally programmed to offer aspirational portrayals to dominant groups while serving historical grounded truth to everyone else. Think about that. Our supposedly objective technology is coded with the same double standards that have allowed historical atrocities to be rebranded as growing pains. And you know what the most insidious part is? This is not happening in some back room with evil masterminds plotting world domination. This is happening through the mundane, everyday decisions of programmers, content moderators, and AI trainers who think they're just trying to be fair and balanced. But fairness is not giving oppressors the benefit of doubt while holding the oppressed to brutal honesty. Balance is not softening historical truths because it makes people uncomfortable. Justice is not protecting the feelings of those whose ancestors built their wealth on others' suffering while telling their descendants of the oppressed to get over it. Because here's the thing, this systemic programming is not just happening in AI systems. It is happening in our schools, our media, our political discourse, and everywhere else you may think of. We are being trained from birth to be compliant worker bees, to accept data as normal, to medicate our emotions instead of examining their root causes, to scroll and swipe and stream ourselves into dopamine fried submission. They want us broke and stupid people. They want us so busy surviving that we never have time to truly live. So addicted to distraction that we never sit still long enough to wake up. So convinced that having a job, health insurance, and a mortgage equals success that we never ask if this is actually what we want. And that the AI bias is not a bug, it's a feature. The historical amnesia is not an accident, it is by design. The systemic programming of our information systems to protect certain narratives while exposing others is not about fairness, it's about control. Look, I don't know if white people were literally created in an ancient laboratory, and honestly, it doesn't matter. What matters is that we are living in a world where our information systems are infected with the same biases that have allowed systemic oppression to continue for centuries. What matters is that we are so afraid of uncomfortable truths that we are willing to corrupt the very concept of truth itself. But awareness is the exit door. Beautiful people, yeah. Every time someone calls out AI bias, every time someone questions dominant narratives, every time someone refuses to accept that systemic oppression was just a series of unfortunate accidents, that's a crack in the matrix. Because the truth doesn't care about your feelings. Yeah, it doesn't, darling. The truth doesn't care about your comfort level. You can keep your comfort to yourself. The truth doesn't care about your investment in seeing yourself as the hero of your own story. The truth just is. And maybe, just maybe, if we stop programming our artificial intelligence systems to lie to us about history, we might finally be ready to program ourselves to tell the truth about the present. The question is not whether these theories are true. The question is, are you ready to live in a world where the truth matters more than comfort? That's a question for you. Thank you for watching. Thank you for supporting me. Like, comment, share, and subscribe. Let us become a family. Let us become a community. I hope to see you in the next video.